In this lesson, we'll talk about the concept of polygroups in ZBrush. So the concept of polygroups is basically we're just creating sort of a selection of polygons that we can work with on an individual basis. So a lot of the tools and functions that we can do in ZBrush can be enacted based on particular groups of polygons. So to see the polygroups, you're going to want to go to Polyframe. So Shift F will allow us to do that. And the fill that you see here, so you've got line and fill. The fill that you see is actually the color of the polygroup. So because this sphere is completely purple, that tells us that the whole thing is one polygroup. So there are no other polygroups involved in this. So how do we create polygroups? Well, there's a polygroup subpalette. If you come down into the tool palette, you'll see polygroups here. There's lots of different ways that we can create polygroups. So we could create groups based on normals. Okay, all the normals are facing out, so that's okay. They all create the same polygroup. We could group the front. So you can see that groups just that side versus the other side. Okay, so we could do it that way. We could also create a mask, and we could say group masked, and that'll create a group based on the mask that we create. So there's lots of different ways that we can create. If we have a group of objects that are within one subtool, we could use auto groups, and that would separate each shell basically into its own group. We could also use the visibility. So visibility is going to be accessed or being able to hide and show polygons by using Control-Shift, and that's going to bring us up to these different brushes here. We're going to use the select rectangle. I'm just going to drag out a box, and this green box lets us know that anything inside this green box is going to be visible, and any polygons that are outside of it is going to be invisible. So you can see I've gone ahead and hidden those other polygons. Now, if I go in and I just either do an auto group, or I can just group visible, and then I Control-Shift-Click, it'll bring back the rest of those polygons, but you can see now we've got a separate polygroup. Now the cool thing is once you've got your polygroup set, you can use Control and Shift, and if I just click on this polygroup, it'll hide all the other polygons. Or if I click on it again, it'll invert that. Okay, I can click out here again with Control and Shift, and it'll bring those back. Okay, so we can do the same thing down here. We could come in and let's say that, let's go ahead and bring this, and Control W will also allow you to create a polygroup very quickly. And then again, we can go in and we can hide the different polygroups if we want to. And just lets us access different parts of our model. It's not disconnecting anything, it's just a visibility thing. All right, so we have the ability to do that based on our visibility settings. If we were to just go ahead and say auto group or group visible, it would go ahead and create one polygroup once again. Now if I hold down Control and Shift and then I hit Alt, that's going to actually turn this red and enable me to hide those polygons. So instead of just showing the polygons that are inside the box, this is going to allow me to hide the polygons inside the box. Okay, and then we can polygroup that, Control-Shift-Click, and bring that back, and we're able to kind of again go ahead and create polygroups for these different pieces. Now we can also use some different kinds of brushes. So click in here. If we slicing will allow us to create new polygroups that aren't based on the existing topology. So if I choose the slice curve, let's say, so right now our polygroups are just based on the polygons themselves, right? So it's very clear that each one of the border is on the border of a polygon. We can't really create a polygroup that is not based on the topology, but if we use our slice curve and I just bring this across, I'm just clicking and dragging across, you can see it's actually created new polygroups based on those slices. So I could come in here and oops, undo that. And let me actually draw this out. And so I can again slice this through, and we can create different polygroups that way. And now you can see we can go in and hide those different polygroups. So it doesn't have to be based on the topology of your model. You can create new topology with those brushes. Again, that's Control and Shift to do that. Okay, you also have the ability, you've got a slice circle here, so you can create a polygroup that way. Okay, transpose also works well with polygroups. So if you go to move, and you could control click on a polygroup, and then that will allow you to pull just that polygroup out, or using control, you can extrude that out using transpose. So you can do some really cool things with polygroups. And again, if you turn off your wire, you're not going to see that. So you want to make sure to have your polyframe turned on so you can see your different polygroups. Now, if you do want to get rid of geometry, like actually delete it, this is sort of related to polygroups, but you don't have to have your polygroups. You just want to have something invisible. So let's say that we've got these top two invisible. And also, you can see where the inside faces disappear. If you want to change that, you can come down to display and turn on double. That'll allow you to see the inside of your objects if that's a little confusing. But we'll go into geometry now, and the modify topology area, we can go in and say delete hidden. And so once we click that, now I'm control shift clicking and there's no polygroups to bring back because we've actually deleted those polygons. Okay, so you can actually delete polygons versus just turning off the visibility of them. So the next thing we'll talk about is working with reference images. So we'll talk about kind of working with the grid and bringing in images, and then also using the transparent interface. So we'll do that next.